Let's see. Thank you. My name is Greg Mello. I'm the Executive Director of the Los Alamos Study Group. Thank you, Chairman Steinborn and other members of the committee. Let's see. I am here to talk about pit production, plutonium warhead core production at Los Alamos National Laboratory. It's a very serious subject in a very serious time. It's the largest project in the history of the state of New Mexico. It is very consequential in itself, and the fact that it is so secret that those of you who are here know very little about it is even more consequential. It's a serious time because of climate change beginning to bite, prosperity falling, and ordinary economic development strategies are now obsolete. So let's see here, page down, yes. There are resources on our website, including prior testimony to this committee, which you also have. As Ms. O'Shaughnessy just said, nuclear weapons comprise the bulk of the work at our two nuclear weapons laboratories. In the case of Los Alamos, between 70 and 80%, not including the cleanup of nuclear weapons. The key takeaways here, first, as the subject was described to the committee, this is not a mission that is being resumed. This mission has never existed at this laboratory before. It's being enormously expanded and made industrial to an unprecedented degree. Now, I don't have this document, but federal people called me up and said, hey, Los Alamos has a document that says their costs, as they understand them, are now $18 billion for pit production over the decade. That does not include the other plutonium missions, which are also expanding. This will require about 4,000 full-time equivalent staff. There are thousands of people working on this project right now, part-time. There will be risks to workers. The conditions are crowded. Production has to be 24/7 because the facilities are so small. There are schedule pressures already. We are at the lab, we are mixing construction workers, production workers, and scientists in these crowded facilities. New personnel can't possibly know everything, and they don't. And there's no true external regulation, although we're very grateful for the safety board. There are risks to the surrounding communities. These include the drastic curtailment of legacy waste shipments as they are crowded out by the production of new waste to the tune of about 2,000 drums per year. There are potential nuclear and hazardous materials releases, and of course there are traffic accidents. This is a very complex project that Los Alamos barely knows how to manage, as they are happy to tell you. The physical scale is unprecedented. It involves multiple new buildings, including new nuclear facilities. So there's no actual bound to how much this could grow. It will involve resource use on an unprecedented scale, doubling the amount of electricity used at the laboratory, and will have impacts on open space across the area. The laboratory knows that its mission now exceeds the road capacity in the area, and as we'll see a little bit later, they are now proposing to bring 2,000 to 3,000 people to the laboratory every day on coach-class buses from locations from Albuquerque and northern New Mexico. Overlooked, easily overlooked are the political impacts. We are at risk of losing our autonomy at this crucial hinge in our development at a time of climate change and energy transition. We've seen absurd proposals for blue hydrogen coming out of our laboratories and being taken up by this administration as if they were realistic because they come from this laboratory. This is the kind of self-interest and loss of autonomy which has hurt this state and will hurt it more. We have to be able to think. Now, NNSA and the LANL are not really sure how to make this work. The plans change from year to year. In some cases, they don't seem entirely realistic, especially as regards how all this work is going to take place 24/7 in facilities that were not designed to purpose. The costs have increased by approximately fourfold in the last 3 years. There's no transparency. It's easy to fall into the idea that this is the Los Alamos National Laboratory, but the character of the laboratory itself is changing, as they acknowledge when they speak to their fellow managers. This is the equivalent of adding another laboratory, the size of Argonne National Laboratory, to Los Alamos. We know that LANL is the greatest institutional consumer of resources and the greatest producer of greenhouse gases in this region. The jobs that will be created are not going to touch the poverty in northern New Mexico. They never have, and they never will. At 18 billion, and by the way, my figure was 14.3. I don't know what the other 3.7 is. This is more than 15 times the size of the Manhattan Project in New Mexico. It is more than the construction cost of all the interstate highways put together. It is almost 5 times the size of New Mexico's expected part of the new infrastructure bill. So what can we do? This committee and this legislature could demand transparency, fundamental transparency about what is going on here. There are a number of documents you have not seen, we have not seen. It's difficult even for members of Congress to get these documents. They can be redacted where they are classified. You can request a pause to authorizations and appropriations pending release to the state, the tribes, and citizens of these and other plans pertaining to the future of northern and central New Mexico, and pending subsequent public meetings in which these plans could be discussed. You can demand that NNSA conduct public meetings once these plans become available, and you have to go around NNSA, DOE, and Triad to make these points. You can engage directly with the White House and with congressional committees for the leverage to make this happen. I have had hundreds of briefings with congressional committee staff, and I can assure you that they will listen very carefully to what this legislature has to say about pit production. If you send a delegation, they will meet with you. Obviously, this committee and this legislature cannot conduct any oversight in any meaningful way if you don't know what's going on. If you get oral presentations, vague statements, euphemisms, you are not going to know what is going on. This is, again, a project of historic magnitude that will put its imprint on this region from this point forward. At this late moment, you might hear, oh, we'll do a site-wide environmental impact statement. Well, we talked about that last year. It is now getting a little bit late for that. And typically, practice there is to present some scenarios that don't actually represent what is going on, while at the same time providing cover for new projects. Those are the only ways I know at this point to acquire transparency. What's really important is to realize that we in New Mexico do have a duty of care, and we do have ample power to make these requests and to use our power to understand what is being proposed by people far away for our state and to use that power. Okay, what is a pit? Pit is the fissile core of the first stage of a nuclear weapon. Right now, Los Alamos does not have the capability to make plutonium pits, not in a manner which would be acceptable for use in the nuclear stockpile. Some have said that this is a continuation of an existing mission. It's a different mission. That's why it costs $18 billion to get it going for this decade. If it were the same mission, it would cost much less. Up to now, the LANL pit program has been an interim program directed toward plutonium sustainment, not industrial production. The LAP4 project, about which you may have heard this morning, I'm not sure, is a brand new project, and it accounts for only a minority of the overall pit production project. Los Alamos aims to make a minimum of 30 pits per year starting in 2026. That may end up being a somewhat higher average. Our best information is that to surge beyond that level is not currently a realistic aspiration. Okay, we've already said it's a gigantic program. And it will involve hiring another 2,000 people plus hundreds of subcontractors. This exceeds the capacity of the Los Alamos site as well as the buildings on the site. It exceeds the regional road capacity, and the housing needs are also surpassed. There have been negotiations with at least 3 pueblos about building temporary housing for construction workers, the kind of thing that has caused a lot of trouble elsewhere. We believe that LANL will seek again a new bridge over White Rock Canyon with connecting highways through the Caja del Rio. There is a new power line proposed through the Caja del Rio for those portions which are not, some of the right-of-way is new and some of it will just add a conductor to existing lines. And as mentioned, it will increase transuranic waste production. It's difficult to put one's head around just how big this is. So here is a chart showing other very large infrastructure projects that have taken place in this state up to now. These have to be considered approximate. I have not gone to the library to update the engineering news record cost index. After about 2010, it's all CPI. But you can see that you could give a 4 kilowatt solar system to every household in the state, not counting installation, and it would only use up about 30% of this. You could hire 5,000 additional teachers. That's 60,000 a year. And that would be about, for 10 years, and that would be about 1/6 of this. So why do our senators and our congresspersons get away with these priorities when we have such crying needs in this state? Why? Why? Now, this is not the end of this project. There's more. So there is planned a pit disassembly and processing facility. We don't know a great deal about it. What you see there is about all we know about it. There are also other buildings down the line, a Sigma replacement radiography complex. These are needed for pit production. They're not in the previous budget. Here's a picture of the plutonium facility. You can see it's very crowded on the outside, and it's also very crowded on the inside. It's old. Let's see. And it is also close to residences. Our plutonium facility here is approximately as close to residences as is the plutonium facility in the suburban laboratory of Lawrence Livermore that will be in charge of the pit production process here at LANL. So LANL is becoming a production plant for the California Clean Lab. Recently, a federal official said to me, in the sober light of day, what the hell are they thinking? That's about safety. There are program pressures that create unsafe conditions in the main plutonium facility. There was recently more than one serious accident, and there may be others that we don't even know about. Working through the night is inherently more dangerous, as is the demographic transition underway in which young workers are being brought in to replace people who are retiring. There have been, as this committee has heard before, more than 1,600 Department of Labor certified occupational fatalities at LANL. There have been 7,430 claims paid, representing 6,927 injured and dead workers. The energy and resource consumption profile of this is quite shocking. LANL does not meet DOE goals for any sort of sustainability. Right now, more than half of LANL's electricity comes from coal-fired generation, and this is supposed to gradually change, but only as the grid itself changes. Finally, this project will make no difference to national security. Now, this is my opinion. This is, up to now, I have been giving you primarily information from the Department of Energy. This is my opinion. In 2032 to 2035, this large facility that you see here under construction will come online in South Carolina. It will more than surpass the production at Los Alamos National Laboratory. It will be able to produce the entire required number of pits all by itself. And that's what it's supposed to look like when it's done. That project in South Carolina is not going to stop for hell or high water, because Congress, the Pentagon, and the NNSA and the White House all know about Los Alamos' problems. So that project over there in Savannah River is going to go ahead until the United States doesn't need pits anymore. We can hope for that day, but until that day comes, that South Carolina project's going to go ahead. Los Alamos pits are for a new warhead designed by Livermore Labs that is to go into production in 2030, or excuse me, deployment and production, both, which is not even strictly needed for the missiles which it's supposed to blow up. So that's the main thrust here today, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Sorry, Greg?
Yes.
Are you talking to me, or are you done?
Oh, I am talking to the committee, I guess. Yeah, sir.
Oh, okay. Are you done?
Yes. Am
okay.
I within my time?
Thank you. Well, you did great, and I was just speaking to our assistant here. So thank you very much for that presentation. Always educational to hear from you, and haven't seen you in a few years, and you grew a beard since then.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, and do you want to introduce who you're with then?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is my wife, Trish, who is my partner in all these things, and
Yes.
and people. You may
Thank you.
Stop the pit production facility in Texas.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, welcome. And I know that, by the way, for those looking at the agenda, we're going to have a representative from TWO Women United who could not make it today. So that's why they couldn't come. Okay, committee. Okay, I just want to make a statement. We, as a committee, wanted to hear very much publicly from the National Nuclear Safety Administration about this pit production expansion mission. And as the vice chair said, they declined the invitation to do so publicly and wanted to meet in private, even though we don't have, many of us, I don't have a classified, I don't have a clearance, so probably many of us in the legislature on this committee don't, so some of us probably do. But so we felt very strongly that they should be speaking in public about what is clearly a pretty profound expansion, has implications, and that's the way government works. Federal government, that's why we have the National Environmental Policy Act, and we go through steps to look at impacts to land and people and health and archaeological sites, and now we're dealing with obviously toxic materials that have profound safety implications to people of Los Alamos in that region. So even today, we usually this committee hears from the director of Los Alamos. We did not today, as you'll notice. So I find that a little troubling that rather than kind of lean into it and discuss some of these issues publicly, that they're going the other way. And I would encourage them to be transparent about what's happening and to do the full due diligence and environmental impacts and everything else. Again, people have a right to know, and it's just in the public interest and public safety and all that. And obviously there's national security implications, and respect those considerations. But I just want folks to know that's, as far as the committee has some oversight responsibilities here, that was our posture, and that's what we worked very hard to do today, and so that's the result, unfortunately, we got. But I appreciate very much you being here, Mr. Mello, and you being a watchdog. And I think the public has a debt of gratitude to watchdogs that are out there.
Thank you, sir.
That are looking out for the public interest and trying to make sure that we protect people and communities. So, do you want to comment?
Just briefly, you've triggered an idea that so most of the documents which this committee would value are not classified. Often they are stamped unclassified controlled nuclear information, or they're stamped official use only. You have access to UPNI, that first category, if you need it. The governor does, NMED does. I did when I worked at NMED. Those documents typically are mostly uncontrolled, but they may have a floor plan or something like that in there which could assist theoretically a terrorist attack someday. So that's the UPNI part. So what we do sometimes, and it's increasingly difficult, is to litigate under the Freedom of Information Act and get a redacted copy in which those particular portions are redacted. If the committee were to, or if the committee had legal resources, then that litigation would be, I think, viewed very favorably by the federal courts. And those redacted versions of those documents could be expedited into the public.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have a question from the committee, Senator McKenna.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Mello, and your partner for being here today. Mr. Mello, I don't, let's see, I am not acquainted with your background, and there could be folks in this room and on the webcast who are not familiar with you and the Los Alamos Study Group. Could you give us a background on your credentials,
Yes.
your scientific knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I was originally trained as a systems engineer at Harvey-Mudd College, president of the Engineering Society, and I did graduate my master's degree at Harvard University in regional planning. I worked for a few years at the Environment Department in hazardous waste enforcement. Mr. Biarzi inherited my field notebook when he came, and so then currently, for the last approximately 30 years, I have been working as a nuclear weapons policy expert twice at Princeton University, and Trish and I have been asked for the 5th time to produce the reference chapter on U.S. nuclear weapons for the upcoming United Nations Non-Proliferation Treaty Review, Preparatory Conference. So we've just been working on nuclear weapons most of the time.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Mello. And you and Patricia absolutely have the credentials to be studying this, and I appreciate your bringing this to this committee's attention and those watching on the webcast. And Chairman, it's really distressing to me that the NNSA is not willing to have a public forum. They work for the people, and they are using taxpayer money. And so whatever we can do, Chairman, to force them to have and convene with us publicly, we need to do that, because I take my role working for the public very seriously, and so that's what has to happen. Everybody has to be accountable. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mello.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else have any comments? Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, presenters. I'm in agreement as well. We need to have the folks from LANL, the folks from NNSA, the folks who are in charge or responsible for this to come talk to us and talk to the public. I personally understand the national security aspects of it, being a retired military member, but there's also a balance. This is impacting these communities. We see how near it is to the residences and the people that live there. And they need to have the information so that they can make decisions on their future, whether they even choose to live there anymore, right? Like, this is information that needs to be out. The one question I do have for Mr. Mello, since it sounds like a lot of this information has not been forthcoming, how are you able to get a lot of this information that you presented today?
Yes, that's an excellent question. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. So there are congressional budget requests which are provided, a big fat document from the Department of Energy. There's those. I was recently with the laboratory director and his deputy, Kelly Beerschmidt, in Washington at a conference of nuclear weapon lab and plant managers, where I got COVID. It was August, and we speak with people in federal agencies by phone and in the past face-to-face, but not since COVID. And we talk all the time with national security reporters and read the trade press. So it's a little, and then there's our files. So it's a little of all of that. And then there are, in South Carolina, there are also people who are working on these issues in the state government with whom we talk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Mello, for that answer. So it sounds to me like you're really just having to pursue and get this information piecemeal, asking questions when the conferences, but it's not really being laid out in a form like this or an actual meeting where we're getting all the answers. So,
yes, excuse me, I'm sorry, sir.
No problem.
The 18 billion comes from a report called the LANL Strategic Plan from, let's see, June or July 2020. We don't have it. It's a CNE document. So, we have to trust, in that case, I had to trust a gentleman who relayed the $18 billion figure, but he's, that's his job to understand this, and he's been doing it for a quarter of a century, so, as a civil servant.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mello. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So.
Okay, thank you, Senator Copeland. Anybody else have any questions? Okay.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you again for coming today.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Everyone,
Anyone else
member
think
committee.
you're